He was a man carved from ice and iron. Alistair, the Duke of Blackwood, was the most powerful and most feared man in London. After a betrayal that shattered his life, he made a promise on his wife's grave. He would never love again. For 5 years, that promise was his armor. He was ruthless, cold, and untouchable. Until a society ball, in a room suffocating with perfume and ambition, a single beam of candlelight broke through the crowd. It lit the face of a woman who wasn't supposed to be there. And in 1 second, the Duke's iron-clad promise began to crack. Alistair St. John, the 5th Duke of Blackwood, despised the London season. He viewed the glittering ballrooms of Mayfair as a gaudy marketplace, where mothers auctioned their daughters and men traded honor for acreage. Tonight, he was in hell. Specifically, he was at the Duchess of Devonshire's annual ball, an event so crushed with social climbing hopefuls that Alistair felt his cravat was actively trying to strangle him. He stood in an alcove, his black evening wear a stark contrast to the colourful silks and satins of the ton. At 32, he was devastatingly handsome, with stark, classical features, eyes the colour of a winter sky, and a mouth that looked as if it had never learned to smile. It was a face that made women sigh and men step aside. "Blackwood," a voice drawled. Alistair turned. It was Viscount Palmerston, a rising politician with an easy smile that Alistair didn't trust. "Palmerston, enjoying the spectacle?" "Immensely," Palmerston grinned, gesturing with his champagne flute. "Look at them, a sea of hungry sharks, and you, Blackwood, are the whale they all wish to beach." Alistair's lip curled. Let them try. It was true. He was the wealthiest, most powerful, and most eligible bachelor in England, and he was utterly unavailable. 5 years ago, his first wife, Rosalind, had been the toast of the town. She was beautiful, charming, and utterly deceitful. Alistair had discovered her in the arms of another man, a lesser baron he'd since financially ruined. The ensuing scandal, culminating in Rosalind's fatal carriage accident while fleeing to the continent, had frozen something vital in Alistair. He'd buried his wife, and with her, he'd buried his heart. His promise was simple. He would never again be made a fool by a beautiful face. His ruthlessness in business and his cold detachment in society had earned him the name the Iron Duke. He was scanning the room, his eyes cataloguing potential business partners and known enemies, when the crowd shifted. A quartet began a new waltz, and that's when he saw her. She was not in the centre of the floor. She was near the French doors leading to the terrace, half hidden by a large potted palm. She was not a debutante. Her dress was wrong. A simple, deep blue muslin, elegant but hopelessly out of fashion, with no jewels to speak of. She was clearly a companion or a poor relation, dragged along as a chaperone. She must have felt his gaze. She turned her head, and the candlelight from a nearby sconce spilled over her features. She was not beautiful in the conventional, porcelain doll way of the other women. Her beauty was intelligent. She had high cheekbones, a strong, proud chin, and eyes that were a startling, clear shade of hazel. She looked tired, and she looked just as he felt, utterly out of place. Alistair felt a jolt, a sharp, unwelcome pull in his chest. It was a sensation he hadn't felt in 5 years. It angered him. It was a weakness, a crack in the armour. He watched as a portly, sour-faced woman, Lady Matilda Croft, snapped at the girl. The girl, Seraphina, nodded, her face betraying no emotion, and handed her shawl to the older woman. Lady Matilda then turned and waddled toward the card-room, leaving the girl alone. Seraphina Hayes closed her eyes for just a moment, breathing in the scent of jasmine from the terrace. She hated these nights, She was the unpaid, unappreciated companion to her late father's sister-in-law, a woman who delighted in casual cruelty. Serafina was in London for one reason, and one reason only, and it had nothing to do with finding a husband. She was here to find justice. Sensing a lull, she slipped through the open French doors onto the cool, dark terrace. She didn't notice the tall, dark figure detach himself from the shadows of the alcove and follow her. "A bit overwhelmed, are we?" A deep voice cut through the night. Serafina spun around. The Duke of Blackwood emerged from the shadows. She recognized him instantly. Everyone did. Her heart didn't flutter. It hammered with a different, more practical fear. This man was power personified. "Your Grace," she said, dipping into a perfect curtsy. "I was merely taking the air." He stopped a few feet from her, his presence sucking the very air from the terrace. "You look less like you are taking the air, and more like you are plotting an escape. Or perhaps," his eyes raked over her simple dress, "you are wondering which of these fools is rich enough and drunk enough to mistake you for a lady." The insult was so sharp, so personal, it took her breath. But Serafina was not a wilting flower. She had endured far worse from her aunt. She raised her chin, her hazel eyes meeting his icy blue ones. "And you, Your Grace," she replied, her voice steady and clear, "look less like you are enjoying the spectacle, and more like a predator deciding which of the herd to cull first." Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Alistair hadn't been spoken to like that in a decade. He expected her to stammer, to blush, to apologize. She did none of those things. She just watched him, her hands clasped calmly in front of her. A slow, dangerous spark lit in his eyes. It wasn't amusement. It was interest. "You have a sharp tongue, mistress?" "Hayes, Your Grace. Serafina Hayes." "Miss Hayes." He rolled the name on his tongue. A sharp tongue can be a liability in a room full of vipers, especially for one with no armor. "Perhaps," Serafina said. "My lack of armor is its own defense. I have nothing you could possibly want, Your Grace, and I want nothing from you. That makes me, I believe, entirely uninteresting." She moved to step past him. "On the contrary," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "That makes you the only interesting thing in this entire, wretched house." He didn't move to stop her, but she felt his gaze on her back like a physical weight as she walked back into the ballroom, her heart finally, terribly, pounding. For 2 days, Alistair could not get the girl's face out of his mind. The way the candlelight had caught the defiance in her eyes, the way she had stood up to him. He was furious with himself. He had a railway to finance, a shipping empire to manage, and a new mill in Manchester that was proving troublesome. He had no time for a sharp-tongued companion in a threadbare dress. He tasked his man of affairs, Mr. Henderson, with a simple query. Find out everything you can about a Miss Serafina Hayes, companion to Lady Matilda Croft. The report was on his desk by evening. It was bleak. Serafina's father, the younger son of a viscount, had died in debt. Her mother was also gone. Her uncle, Sir Reginald Croft, had taken her in as an act of charity, which clearly translated to unpaid servant. She was 24, past the age of marrying well, and had no dowry. She was, as he had suspected, a nobody. So why did she plague his thoughts? He found his answer 4 nights later, at a rout hosted by the Marquess of Salisbury. He had not intended to go, but a restlessness he couldn't name had driven him from his silent, cavernous home on Grosvenor Square. He saw her as soon as he entered. She was standing near a pillar, holding her aunt's fan and reticule. Lady Matilda was deep in a card game, ignoring her completely. Serafina looked exhausted, the shadows under her eyes more pronounced than they had been on the terrace. Before Alistair could move, another man approached her. It was Lord Marcus Grayson. If Alistair was the Iron Duke, Grayson was the Silk Devil. He was handsome in a way Alistair was not, all charming smiles, warm brown eyes, and a reputation for breaking hearts and gambling fortunes. He was the one man in London Alistair actively loathed. There was a rumour, one Alistair had never been able to substantiate, that Grayson had been the man in his wife's chambers that fateful day. But Grayson had an alibi, and the Baron Alistair had ruined had taken the blame. Grayson leaned in close to Serafina, his voice a low, intimate purr, a rose blooming in a desert. "How is it I haven't made your acquaintance, Miss Hayes?" Serafina said, taking an involuntary step back, pressing herself against the marble pillar. "And you are blocking my view of my aunt, my lord." "Your aunt?" Grayson laughed, a pleasant sound that made Alistair's skin crawl. "Forget your aunt. A woman with eyes like yours should not be watching old women play whist. She should be waltzing." "I do not waltz, my lord." "Then you shall learn. With me." He put a hand on her arm. It was a possessive, proprietary gesture, and it sent a bolt of pure, white-hot rage through Alistair. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. The crowd parted for him as if he were Moses, and they the Red Sea. "Grayson!" Grayson's head snapped up. His charming smile faltered, replaced by a mask of wary dislike. "Blackwood, I didn't realize you attended such frivolous gatherings." "I am here," Alistair said, his voice clipping the air, "to retrieve Miss Hayes." He didn't look at Serafina. He looked only at Grayson, a clear challenge in his gaze. Grayson's hand tightened on Serafina's arm. "Is that so? And what business does the great Duke of Blackwood have with a simple companion?" "She is a distant relation of my late wife's." The lie was fluid and instant, spoken with such authority that half the people listening believed it. "Her aunt, Lady Croft, has asked me to escort her." Serafina was staring at him, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. He gave her a sharp, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Play along. Grayson, a man who survived on social nuance, knew he was beaten. To challenge a duke on a matter of family was social suicide, especially a duke as ruthless as Blackwood." With a smile that didn't reach his eyes, Grayson released her arm and bowed. "Of course, a family matter. Forgive my intrusion, Miss Hayes. We will speak again, I am sure." He melted back into the crowd. Alistair finally turned to Serafina. She looked pale. "Your Grace," she whispered, "why did you do that?" "I dislike Lord Grayson," he stated, as if that explained everything. "And he was bothering you." "I can handle myself, Your Grace." "Can you?" His eyes dropped to the red marks on her arm where Grayson had gripped her. It did not appear so. He offered his arm. "Your aunt is in the card room. I will return you to her." She hesitated, then placed her hand on his arm. It was the first time they had touched. He was wearing black gloves, but he could feel the tremor in her fingers. Or perhaps, he realized with a jolt, it was his own. As they walked, the entire ballroom watched. Whispers followed them like the rustle of dry leaves. The Iron Duke, who had not touched a woman in 5 years, was escorting a nobody. When they reached Lady Matilda, the woman's jaw dropped. "Your Grace," she simpered, practically falling out of her chair. "Lady Matilda," Alistair said, his voice pure frost. "Your niece looks unwell. I suggest you take her home." It was not a suggestion. It was a command. Lady Matilda, terrified and thrilled to be addressed by a duke, gathered her things instantly. As Serafina turned to go, Alistair spoke, his voice so low only she could hear. "Hyde Park. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock by the Serpentine. We need to talk. I cannot—" "You will, or I will be forced to explain my familial concern to your aunt in greater detail." It was a threat, plain and simple. Serafina met his gaze, her own flashing with anger. But she nodded. He watched her go, the feeling of her small hand on his arm still burning through his glove. He had interfered. He had lied. He had, for the first time in 5 years, acted on an impulse that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with her. It was, he decided, the most dangerous thing he had ever done. The next morning, Serafina lied to her aunt for the first time in her life. She claimed she needed to purchase new ribbons for Lady Matilda's bonnet, a mundane enough errand to grant her an hour of freedom. She walked to Hyde Park, her stomach a knot of anxiety. She was not afraid of the Duke's anger. She was afraid of his power. He had rescued her last night, but it felt less like a rescue and more like a transfer of ownership. She now owed him an explanation. She found him by the Serpentine, not on horseback, but standing by the water's edge, skipping stones with a grim-faced precision. He looked more like a man at war than a man at leisure. "Your Grace," she said, stopping a proper 10 feet away. He turned. "Miss Hayes, thank you for coming." He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Who are you?" "I am who you said I am. A companion." "No, that is what you are. I am asking who you are. Why did Grayson single you out? And why?" His voice dropped. "Do you look at the world as if you are expecting it to burst into flames?" Serafina took a deep breath. She could lie. She could invent a story, play the damsel. But she looked at his face, at the cold intelligence in his eyes, and knew he would see through it. Her only weapon was the truth, or at least part of it. "I am in London," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "to find a cache of letters." He paused, a stone halfway to the water. "Letters? Blackmail?" "Justice!" she snapped, her anger flaring. "My father was the eldest son of Viscount Penhurst, but he displeased his father. He married my mother, a woman with no title and no money. He was disinherited. A common enough story. The story is not common. My grandfather was a cruel man. When my father died, my uncle, Sir Reginald, produced a will that left everything to him. My mother and I were left with nothing. But my mother swore, until the day she died, that my father had proof. Proof that his father's will was a forgery. She said he kept a bundle of letters from my grandfather, and a signed confession from the lawyer he bribed. Alistair turned fully to face her. He was listening now. My mother believed those letters were hidden. Sir Reginald and Lady Matilda have spent the last 6 years searching my father's meagre possessions for them, just to destroy them. I am searching for them to reclaim my father's name, and his title, and the estate that is rightfully mine." "A treasure hunt," Alistair said, his tone skeptical. "And you believe these priceless letters are just lying about in London?" "I don't know where they are," Serafina admitted, her frustration palpable. "That's the problem. My father's last journal entry, before he died of fever, mentioned he had entrusted his greatest treasure to a friend. A new friend, someone he admired, someone powerful. He never wrote the name. So you came to London, to attend balls, hoping this powerful friend will just announce himself?" "I came to London to watch," she countered, "to listen, to see who my father might have known. I thought if I moved in the same circles, I might hear a name, a connection, anything. Alistair stared at her. The story was wild. It was fantastical, and yet, looking at the desperate sincerity in her eyes, he believed every word. It explained her intensity. It explained her lack of interest in the ton. She wasn't a mouse. She was a hunter. "And Grayson?" he asked, his voice softer. "I have no idea," she said, shaking her head. "He had never spoken to me before last night. I assumed he was just bored." Alistair knew better. Grayson was never just bored. He was a shark that smelled blood. If he sensed Serafina was looking for something, he would want to know what, and if he could profit from it. "You are in more danger than you know," Alistair said flatly. "You are a woman, alone, with no money, looking for a treasure that could make you a viscountess. You are a lamb walking into a slaughterhouse, Miss Hayes. And Grayson is not the only wolf." "I am not afraid," she said. "Then you are a fool." He threw the last stone. It skipped 7 times before sinking. "This friend of your father's, did he mention anything else? A man? A woman?" Serafina hesitated. There was one more detail, one she had held back. "He mentioned a patroness, a lady of the highest society, someone who had been kind to him." Alistair's blood went cold. "A name. He only wrote her initial, R. Rosalind, his wife." The world tilted. Alistair's mind raced. His late wife, Rosalind. She collected people, waifs and strays, artists, poets. A disinherited younger son like Serafina's father would have been exactly her sort of pet. It was plausible. Too plausible. If Rosalind had been this patroness, then the letters— "My God," Alistair breathed. "What is it?" Serafina said, seeing the colour drain from his face. "I think," Alistair said, his voice a harsh rasp, "you may have been looking in the wrong place. I think those letters may be in my house." He turned and looked at her, and for the first time, his icy gaze was not cold, but burning. "I think your father's powerful friend might have been my wife." Serafina felt as though the ground had fallen away. Your wife? The late Duchess?" "It makes a terrible kind of sense," Alistair said, more to himself than to her. He started to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Rosalind was sentimental. She loved secrets. She loved being a patroness to those she deemed tragic. Your father would have been a perfect project." "Then the letters? If she had them, they are at Blackwood House, in her archives. I locked them away after her death. No one has entered those rooms in 5 years." A wild, terrifying hope surged in Serafina's chest. She was close. After all these years, she was close. "Your Grace, Alistair, I must see them, I must. You have to let me look." He stopped pacing and looked at her. His face was a mask again. The brief flash of connection was gone, replaced by the calculating coldness of the Iron Duke. "You are asking me to unlock the most painful part of my past on the word of a stranger for a story about a forged will. It is the truth. It is your truth," he countered. "What if you are wrong? What if you are, forgive me, simply delusional? Or worse, what if you are a remarkably good actress, sent by my enemies to gain access to my home?" "You know I am not," she whispered, wounded. "I know," he said, stepping closer, "that you are the first person in 5 years to make me act against my own judgment. That makes you dangerous, not to be trusted." Serafina's hope crumbled. He was right. Why would he trust her? He was a duke. She was a companion. "Then I have nothing. I am back where I started." She turned to leave, the defeat bitter in her throat. However, his voice stopped her. She turned back. He was watching her with an unnerving intensity. "You have a Grayson problem. And now, because I interfered, I have a Grayson problem. He will not let this go. He saw me with you. He saw me protecting you. He will dig, and he will find your story, Miss Hayes, and he will almost certainly try to get those letters for himself." "What are you proposing?" she asked, her voice wary. "A bargain," Alistair said. "The Tun is already whispering. They saw me escort you. They saw me command your aunt. The worst thing I can do now, for both our sakes, is to let you fade back into obscurity. It would confirm Grayson's suspicions. So what do? We do the opposite." A grim, mirthless smile touched his lips. "We lean into it. I will grant you access to my wife's archives. You may search to your heart's content. I will have Mr. Henderson, my man of affairs, chaperone you. You will not be left alone." "And in return?" she asked, dreading the answer. "In return," he said, "you will no longer be Miss Hayes, the drab companion. Starting tonight, you will be Miss Seraphina Hayes, my protégée, a distant relation whom I have taken under my wing." Seraphina was stunned. "You want to sponsor me? I want to control this. You will attend balls, dinners, and the opera, on my arm. You will be dressed by my modiste. You will be seen, and you will be untouchable. Grayson will not dare to approach you when you are so clearly under my protection. It gives you the freedom to search, and it gives me the cover to observe." "Observe what?" "You," he said simply. "And Grayson. I want to know why he is so interested in you." It was a mad proposal. It was a devil's bargain. He would give her access to her future, and in return, she would be his pawn, paraded around London as his new pet project. It would save her from Grayson, but it would tether her to a man who was just as dangerous, if not more so. But what choice did she have? And Lady Matilda? "I will send Mr. Henderson to negotiate your release from her service this afternoon. I suspect a bank draft will settle her maternal affections rather quickly." He was ruthless. He was efficient. He was terrifying. "And when I find the letters?" Seraphina asked. "Then our bargain is concluded. You will have your proof, you will become Viscountess Penhurst, and you will be your own woman." He said the last words as if they left a bad taste in his mouth. "I agree," Seraphina said, her voice shaking but firm. "Good." He nodded. "All business. A carriage will collect you from Lady Croft's at 6 this evening. You will be taken to my sister's townhouse. Lady Agatha will prepare you." "Prepare me?" "You cannot search my archives or attend the opera on my arm, dressed in that. My sister enjoys a challenge." He looked her up and down, and for the first time, she felt a blush creep up her neck. His gaze was entirely too thorough. "She will have her work cut out for her." He turned and walked away, leaving Seraphina by the Serpentine, her world spinning. She had just made a deal with the Iron Duke. She wasn't sure if she had just saved herself or damned herself completely. Lady Agatha, the Dowager Marchioness of Fenwick, was nothing like her brother. Where Alistair was all ice and shadow, Agatha was small, sharp, and full of a nervous, bird-like energy. She was a decade his senior, and one of the few people on earth he trusted. "So," Agatha said, circling Seraphina in the middle of a grand, sun-drenched sitting room, "you're the one. The girl who's managed to make my brother do something interesting for the first time since Rosalind." Seraphina stood stiffly, still in her blue muslin. "I don't know what he told you, my lady." "He told me a ridiculous story about letters and inheritance. I don't believe a word of it," Agatha said cheerfully, tapping her cheek. "But it's a marvelous cover story. He wants you polished. He wants you to be a diamond. He wants you to make that odious Marcus Grayson absolutely sick with jealousy. And that, my dear, is a project I can get behind." For the next week, Seraphina's life was a whirlwind. Modistes, hairdressers, and tutors in etiquette descended on the Fenwick townhouse. Agatha stripped away her drab exterior, revealing the swan beneath. When Seraphina looked in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the weary companion. In her place was a sophisticated, elegant lady, draped in deep emeralds and rich sapphires that made her hazel eyes glow. And then the second part of the bargain began. Her days were spent in the archives at Blackwood House. The rooms were on the 3rd floor, preserved as if in amber. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from the window. The scent of old paper and Rosalind's faint, lingering perfume, jasmine and roses, clung to everything. It was a mausoleum. Mr. Henderson, a quiet man with kind eyes, sat in the corner, ostensibly reading a ledger. But Seraphina knew he was watching. At first it was awful. She was an intruder in a dead woman's life. She waded through 5 years of correspondence, invitations, dressmakers' bills, gushing letters from society friends. There was no mention of her father. She felt Alistair's skeptical gaze on her, even when he wasn't there. Her nights were spent with him. Their first public appearance was at the opera. When Alistair entered his box with Seraphina on his arm, a hush fell over Covent Garden. Every opera glass in the house turned toward them. "Breathe, Miss Hayes," Alistair murmured, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "They can smell fear." "They're staring," she whispered. "Let them," he replied, his voice a low vibration she felt through her ribs. "You are with me." And she was. He was an impenetrable shield. He introduced her to society's dragons, the patronesses of Almack's, like the formidable Lady Jersey, with a cool authority that dared them to question her presence. "Miss Seraphina Hayes, my late wife's cousin. She is staying with my sister." The lie was repeated, and it became fact. Lord Grayson was there, of course. His eyes burned into them from across the room. He looked furious. As the weeks wore on, something began to shift. The bargain became complicated. They spent hours together in his carriage, traveling from one crushing event to the next. They talked. He was surprised to find she was not just defiant. She was brilliant. She had read voraciously. She could discuss politics, crop rotation, and the new steam engines with an insight that startled him. He, in turn, began to open up. He spoke of his mills in Manchester, his desire to build safer housing for his workers. She saw beneath the ruthless exterior a man burdened by duty and trapped by his own grief. One evening, he came to the archives. Mr. Henderson, seeing the Duke, quietly excused himself. "Any luck?" Alistair asked, leaning against a bookshelf. "Nothing," Seraphina sighed, rubbing her temples. She was covered in dust. "Just so many party invitations. Was this all she did?" "For the most part." "Yes." His voice was bitter. "No, that's not fair," Seraphina said, pulling a different ledger. She kept meticulous notes on her charities. She paid for an orphanage to have a new roof, and she funded a small art gallery for a painter no one had heard of. Alistair looked surprised. "I didn't know that." "You locked it all away," Seraphina said softly, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. "You buried the good with the bad, Your Grace." He looked at the portrait of Rosalind that hung over the fireplace, beautiful, smiling, vacant. She was not what she seemed. "Perhaps," Seraphina said, holding his gaze, Neither are you. He took a step toward her. The air in the dusty room crackled. He was standing so close she could see the flecks of grey in his blue eyes. He looked for a moment, not like the Iron Duke, but like a man who was lonely. He reached out, his gloved finger tracing a smudge of dust on her cheek. "You are a remarkable woman, Seraphina Hayes." He said her name as if it were a prayer or a curse. She didn't breathe. She didn't move. She was trapped in the intensity of his gaze, in the sudden, shocking realization that she wanted him to kiss her. The clock on the mantel chimed. It broke the spell. Alistair snatched his hand back as if burned. He spun on his heel, his armor slamming back into place. "Henderson!" he barked. "It's late. See Miss Hayes back to my sister's." He strode from the room without another word, leaving Seraphina's heart hammering against her ribs. The bargain was changing, and the ice around the Duke's heart was beginning to thaw. The search grew more desperate. Seraphina had been through every box, every ledger, every hat box. Nothing. She was beginning to lose hope. What if her father had been wrong? What if Rosalind had destroyed the letters? Alistair, too, was on edge. His carefully constructed bargain was backfiring. He had intended to use Seraphina as a shield, a tool to smoke out Grayson. Instead, he found himself thinking of her constantly, the way her mind worked, the way her eyes lit up when she argued with him. He was developing feelings. It was the one thing he had sworn would never happen. He grew possessive. He hated the way other men looked at her, now that she was the Duke's diamond. He hated most of all the way Grayson watched her. The trap was sprung at the Duke's own ball, the grandest event of the season, held at Blackwood House. It was meant to be the pinnacle of Seraphina's coming out. She was magnificent. Agatha had dressed her in a gown of midnight blue velvet, with diamonds, loaned by Agatha, sparkling at her throat. She stood beside Alistair in the receiving line, and not a single person questioned her right to be there. Lord Grayson arrived late. He was all smiles, bowing low over Seraphina's hand. "Miss Hayes, you are the talk of London," he said, his eyes glittering. "But I fear our host has been telling a small fib." "I don't know what you mean, Lord Grayson," Seraphina said, trying to retrieve her hand. He held it a moment too long. "Our dear Duke," Grayson said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "has been claiming you as a cousin. But my sources tell me a much more interesting story. A story of a lost inheritance, a forgery, and a desperate search for letters." The blood drained from Seraphina's face. Alistair went rigid. "Grayson," Alistair said, his voice a low warning. "You are drunk." "Am I?" Grayson released Seraphina's hand and turned to the crowd. "Or am I the only one willing to tell the truth?" The music had stopped. The entire ballroom was listening. "This woman," Grayson announced, pointing at Seraphina, "is no Miss Hayes. She is Lady Seraphina, the rightful Viscountess Penhurst, and she has been in this house for weeks, not as a guest, but as a treasure hunter." Gasps rippled through the room. Lady Matilda Croft, who Seraphina now realized must have been Grayson's source, was grinning with malicious triumph from behind a pillar. "She has been using the Duke's good name," Grayson continued, his voice ringing with false outrage, "to search this house for the proof she needs to steal her uncle's title. It was a brilliant move. He had twisted her truth into a lie. He made her sound like a cunning, social-climbing fraud." Alistair looked at Seraphina. Her face was ashen. She was looking at him, her eyes wide with panic. And Alistair broke. All his old wounds, all his fears of betrayal came roaring to the surface. He saw Rosalind. He saw a beautiful woman using him, using his house, to get what she wanted. He saw a fool. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice deathly quiet. "Are you Lady Seraphina?" "Alistair, please," she begged, reaching for his arm. "It's complicated. I found my father's journal. It confirmed." He recoiled from her touch. "Is it true?" "Yes," she whispered, tears welling. "Yes, but not like he says. I am the rightful heir. The letters are my proof." "So," Grayson said, "she admits it. She has been playing you for a fool, Blackwood, just like your wife did." That was the final blow. Alistair's face became a mask of cold, terrifying rage. "The Iron Duke was back. You came to my home," Alistair said, his voice slicing through the silence. "Under a false pretense. You accepted my protection. You accepted my sister's hospitality. You wore her jewels." His eyes flicked to the diamonds at her throat. "And all of it was a lie." "No, Alistair, that's not true." Seraphina was sobbing now, the humiliation complete. "The bargain was your idea." "The bargain," he hissed, "was for a Miss Hayes to look for a possibility, not for a Lady Seraphina to rifle through my home to claim a title." "But what is the difference?" she cried. "The difference," he said, his voice breaking with a cold fury, "is that you knew your claim was real, and you used me to get it. You used my grief. You used my wife's memory. You are no better than she was." He turned to his butler. "Mr. Davies, see Miss Hayes out." "Your Grace!" Lady Agatha pushed through the crowd. "Alistair, you are making a mistake." "She is a liar and a user," Alistair snarled. "Get her out of my house, now." The crowd stared, silent and horrified. Grayson watched, a smirk of pure victory on his face. Seraphina looked at Alistair, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't the public humiliation that hurt. It was the look in his eyes, the look of utter betrayal. The look that told her he believed, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was exactly like the woman who had destroyed him. With her head held high, though tears streamed down her face, Seraphina Hayes walked past the butler and out the front door of Blackwood House into the cold, dark night. The dream was over. She had lost. After the last guest had fled the scandal-ridden ballroom, Alistair went to his study. He did not call for his valet. He did not put out the lights. He simply poured a brandy, and then another. He had been right all along. His promise, his armor, it was all necessary. The moment he had let it slip, the moment he had allowed that flicker of candlelight to warm him, he had been burned. Seraphina Hayes was a fraud, a brilliant, beautiful, hazel-eyed fraud. He had never felt so empty or so furious. He went up to the archives, the rooms he had avoided for 5 years. He stalked in, his rage a living thing. He would purge this place. He would burn every trace of Rosalind and of Seraphina from his life. He strode to the fireplace. "Henderson!" he roared. The butler, Davies, appeared, his face pale. "Mr. Henderson has retired, Your Grace. It is past 4 a.m. "Then you will help me. I want this room cleared. I want everything, burned. Your Grace, perhaps in the morning." "Now!" Alistair bellowed. He swept a stack of ledgers from the desk. They hit the floor with a puff of dust. As he grabbed for another stack, his hand brushed against the large, ornate portrait of Rosalind above the mantel. He stared at it, his chest heaving. "You," he whispered to the smiling face, "this is all your fault. Even from the grave you destroy me." In his rage, he slammed his fist against the heavy gilded frame. There was a click. The frame, which he now saw was attached to the wall by a hinge, swung open. It was a wall safe, hidden behind the portrait. Alistair stared. He had never known it was there. Inside was a single, black-lacquered box, His hands trembled as he took it out. It was not locked. He opened it. On top was a small, leather-bound book, a diary. Rosalind's diary. Beneath it, a thick packet of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. He sank into the chair, the brandy forgotten. He opened the diary. His wife's familiar, looping script filled the pages. He read, and the blood in his veins turned to ice. The diary was not full of parties and dresses. It was a record of her betrayals, and it was all there. September 14th, 1813. Met a charming, tragic fool today. A Mr. Hayes. He believes he is the rightful Viscount Penhurst. He has the most interesting letters. He is desperate and trusts me implicitly. He has given them to me for safekeeping. Men are such idiots. Alistair felt sick. He kept reading. October 2nd. Lord Grayson grows bold. He bores me. But he is useful. He gambles too much, and I have had to assist him. October 20th. Grayson is a fool. He thinks I love him. I told Alistair it was Baron Croftly I met with. Alistair believed me. He always does. He is strong and powerful, and as predictable as a clock. I almost feel sorry for him. Alistair's hands were shaking so hard he could barely read. He flipped to the last entries. November 5th, 1813. The night of my accident. His heart stopped. This was written after her death? No. On the day. She had been planning to leave. Grayson is becoming a problem. He knows I have been lending him money that is not mine. And he knows about the Hayes letters. He wants them. He says they are leverage. I told him I would rather burn them. He became angry. He has arranged my carriage for my trip to Dover. He said he checked it himself to ensure it was safe. There was a look in his eye I didn't like. I will not take that carriage. I will take the post-chaise. I will leave this box with my solicitor, Mr. Baring. If anything should happen to me, Baring is to send this to the Duke. Alistair is a cold man, but he is a just man. He will see justice done. For Mr. Hayes, and perhaps even for me. But she never made it to the solicitor. Grayson must have realized she switched carriages. He must have... Alistair dropped the diary. It wasn't an accident. Grayson had murdered her. He had tampered with the carriage, intending for her to die, to silence her. He then grabbed the letters. He broke the ribbon. The first one he unrolled was a signed, witnessed confession from a lawyer, admitting to forging the will of Viscount Penhurst on the orders of Sir Reginald Croft. It was all true. Seraphina. Oh God, Alistair whispered, burying his face in his hands. What have I done? He hadn't just humiliated her. He had accused her of the very crimes, of being a user, a liar, when she was the only honest person he had met in a decade. He had cast her out, believing the lies of his wife's murderer. He scrambled to his feet. He ran from the room, shouting, "Davies! My horse! Saddle it! Now! And send a runner to Bow Street. I want the chief magistrate. Tell him it's a matter of murder. Tell him to meet me at the home of Lord Marcus Grayson." Seraphina had not gone to Lady Matilda's. She would rather die. She had walked, dazed and weeping, through the pre-dawn streets until she found her way to the only other person in London who had shown her kindness. Lady Agatha. Agatha's butler, clearly scandalized, had let the ruined, velvet-clad woman in. Agatha herself had come down, taken one look at Seraphina's face, and simply held her. "He's a fool, my dear," Agatha said, her voice sharp with anger. "He is a brilliant, powerful, and utterly idiotic fool. He has let his past poison his present." He believed him," Seraphina sobbed. "He looked at me, as if I was her." "You are nothing like her," Agatha said fiercely. It was just past dawn when a frantic pounding echoed through the townhouse. The butler rushed to the door to find the Duke of Blackwood, still in his evening attire, his hair undone, his face pale and haggard. He looked wild. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Alistair, how dare you?" Agatha began. "Agatha, please! Where is she?" His voice cracked. Seraphina appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes red and swollen. Alistair saw her, and his mask of iron melted. He looked broken. He took the stairs 2 at a time. He didn't stop until he was standing in front of her. He didn't speak. He just held out the packet of letters. She looked at them, confused. "It's all there," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The confession. Your father's title. It's yours. It's all true." Seraphina stared at the papers, then at his face. How? It was in a safe, behind her portrait, along with her diary. He took a ragged breath. She knew. She knew Grayson was dangerous. Seraphina, he murdered her. He sabotaged her carriage to get those letters and to silence her. The full horror of it washed over her. So he knew. Last night, he knew. He knew he was accusing you of a crime he was committing himself, Alistair finished. He was using your scandal to cement his own safety. By ruining you, he ensured I would never look again. I would never find the truth. "The magistrates," she whispered. "They are at his house now. With the diary, he's finished." An enormous weight lifted from Seraphina's shoulders. Her family, her father. It was done. She had won. She looked at the man in front of her, this powerful, terrible, broken duke, and she felt nothing, just an echoing emptiness. "So," she said, her voice flat, "the bargain is concluded." She took the letters from his hand. "Thank you for your assistance, Your Grace. I will trouble you no longer." She turned to walk away. "Seraphina, wait!" He grabbed her arm, not with possession, but with a desperate, pleading grip. She turned back. He was undone. The Iron Duke was gone, and in his place was just a man. I have no words," he stammered. "To say I am sorry is an insult. It's too small. What I did to you, what I said to you, it was unforgivable." "Yes," she said, her voice cold. "It was." "I know," he said, not flinching. "I saw you. And I saw Rosalind. I saw a ghost. I have been so blind, Seraphina. I have been living in a prison of my own making for 5 years. I built walls of iron to protect a memory that was a lie, and in doing so, I almost destroyed the only truth I have ever found." He stepped closer. The early morning light from the window lit his face, just as the candlelight had done at the ball. But now she saw no coldness, only a raw, desperate vulnerability. "That first night," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "at the ball, you were the first thing that made me feel alive in 5 years. And it terrified me. I hated you for it. I hated myself for it." He reached up, his hand shaking, and touched her cheek. She did not pull away. "I promised I would never love again. I swore it on her grave, and it was the stupidest, most arrogant promise a man has ever made." He looked into her eyes, his own shining with unshed tears. "The ruthless Duke promised never to love again," he whispered, "until the ball lit her face in candlelight. And he was a fool, because he didn't realize that the candlelight, it didn't just light up your face, Seraphina. It lit up me. It lit up all the dark, empty places I had hidden away." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Don't leave me in the dark. Please. I know I don't deserve you, but I love you. I love you, Seraphina Hayes. Or Lady Seraphina. I don't care what your name is. I love you." And then he kissed her. It was not a duke's kiss, of possession or power. It was a kiss of utter surrender. It was desperate and broken and healing. It was the end of the iron and the beginning of the man. Seraphina, who had won her title and her fortune, felt her own walls crumble. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to hold his face. She had come to London seeking justice, and she had found it. But she had also found something she never, ever expected. She had found the heart of the Iron Duke, and it was, she realized, hers to keep. What a journey! A man so broken by a promise that he almost destroyed the one woman who could save him. Alistair, the Iron Duke, had to lose everything, his pride, his certainty, and his past, to finally find the truth. And Seraphina, a woman who came searching for justice, found a love more powerful than any title. Their story reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength is found in surrender, and that even the coldest heart can be thawed by the right light. If you were moved by the story of Seraphina and the Duke, please let me know in the comments. What was your favorite twist? And don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves a story of drama and redemption. Most importantly, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We have so many more stories of romance, karma, and hidden truths to share with you. Thank you for listening.